We're going to be going through the end of chapter 4 and a little bit into chapter 5. And if you recall from last Sunday, we were working through mostly of chapter 4, the beginning of chapter 4. And one of the things that I always try to do is try to figure out, okay, why was it broken up like this? Is there some reason why we started in John 4:46 through 54, the end of the chapter? Or, why didn't we just go all the way through, chapter by chapter by chapter? But as you can see, and we'll talk a little bit about it, where there's a specific reason, a rhyme and reason why it's broke up into the way it is, just based on the scenes, the acts, basically, the way it goes through. If you're looking at it in the sense of a movie, you can see where it completely transitions to something different. And I think that these three sections that we're going to talk about tonight fit nicely together. We're going to be seeing two different miracles or signs, whatever we want to call those, and we'll call them different things as we go through. They are the same. And then we also see some of the results of one of the last miracles that Jesus talks about, or actually does. He doesn't just talk about it; he does it. But before we do that, let's go to God in a word of prayer. God, our Father in heaven, we are so thankful that you are Father, that you love us, that we have your inspired word to be able to open it and to be able to rightly divide it. And we pray, God, as we go through this lesson, we'll be able to deeply understand what Jesus and the Apostle John was talking about in regard to the different events that occurred, and not only just reading the events to be able to deeply understand more about Jesus and more about you, more about your Spirit, as well as application that we can take away from today to be able to use as we go through our daily lives, to be able to help us grow closer to you, to love you more, to be a better Christian. We are so thankful that we have this. We're thankful that we have your Son Jesus and the examples that he left us. More importantly, the sacrifice that he provided for us, as well as the sacrifice that you gave by providing him down in this magnificent plan that you have designed. We are so thankful for that, and it's in his name that we pray. Amen. All right, so let's kind of just do a quick little review on what we talked about on Sunday, because it kind of links back into what we're going to be talking about in regards to verse 46. So if you recall, in the beginning of chapter 4, Jesus goes out of his way, particularly to talk to somebody. And who was that? Who did he go to talk to? The Samaritan woman. Okay, that's important, because what do we know about the Samaritans? They're not Jews, right? They have a different belief. And this woman, was she a follower? Did she understand? Did she believe? We don't really know at that point, but we do know that she had how many husbands?
Is it none or 5?
Yeah, it talked about 5. But so what we're talking about is that she was living in sin. In fact, I think that the last one, when Jesus understands the heart, he can actually see that, because he asked her a question once he started getting into the meat of his point. And what did he ask her? About her husband. Yeah, go call your husband. And she's like, what am I going to say to this? And he's like, well, I already know, basically. But what was the whole point of that interaction that Jesus had with the Samaritan woman at the well? And we're talking about, again, water. What do you think?
Well, it was an effort to introduce this teaching to the Samaritan. I mean, that's exactly what happened, don't you think?
So what she did was, what did she do with that information that she had?
She thought he was a prophet.
She thought he was a prophet. So she goes off and she talks to to who? The village, right? And what did they do? Yeah, they did. And so, and it also talks more about, it kind of gives us an example of, even the individuals that you would think the least that would get the message. But
he was very direct with them. I who speak to you
Right,
Jesus doesn't always get that direct.
right. And why do you think he did that with them?
Not when that is one encounter with him, maybe just let him know.
Well, and also maybe they didn't quite, they didn't follow as much as maybe the teachers of the law, and they had a different heart, they had a different motive. We're going to see that with the Pharisees in this next chapter that we're working towards. They're not like the Sadducees that we had in this example, but we also saw that it was also an area where he introduced water as his message, to be able to show he talked about the flowing water. We're going to see a little bit about flowing water in this scene as well. So when you're talking about the difference between, he was talking about water. Was it a water that was in the well that they were bringing up and down? It's a different kind of water that he was talking about. Even literally, right? He was talking about a flowing water, right? And living water that would actually move. And then in this case, that living water, of course, wasn't real water. It was a quenchable thirst that you can continue to come back to over and over again. So then, after that, let's take a look over in verse 43. And it says, after 2 days he departed Galilee, for Jesus himself had testified that a prophet has no honor in his hometown. So, when he came to Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him, having seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the feast, for they too had gone to the feast. And then we get into our section that we're going to talk about tonight, and it kind of changes scenery. So he's still continuing to be on the move, and let's read verse 46 through 53. Can I get a reader for that, please?
So Jesus came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and implored him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. But Jesus said to him, unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. The nobleman said to him, Sir, come down before my child dies. Jesus said to him, Go your way, your son lives. So the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, and he went his way. And as he was now going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, Your son lives. Then he inquired of them the hour when he got better, and they said to him, Yesterday at the 7th hour, and the fever left him. So the father knew that it was at the same hour in which Jesus said to him, Your son lives. And he himself believed, and his whole household.
All right, let's think a little bit about what we just read here. First of all, in verse 46, Jesus returns. And what do we remember at that point?
It was his first miracle.
His first miracle, the first one that was recorded, that he talked about. I wonder if there's any reason why he starts out with at least identifying that where he had made water to wine. You think it was just more or less a stake in the ground to let us know what happened, to be able to continue to show his signs that he wanted to identify? I think he's just preparing us for another that he's going to see. He's just setting up the scene, and then in verse 47 he says, go ahead.
Well, it gives us a reason why the nobleman was seeking out Jesus, because he had done a miracle in Cana, and then the news was spread, and he had heard about it.
Right. That's a very good point. So it does show that he's been there before. So this nobleman, like you said, and I think mine says that he's an official. We'll talk a little bit about that in regard to the different translations of it. But you're right, and that does set it up to be able to say, yes, there was a sign here, and people had known about that. Even though, if you recall back when that first miracle was done, did he actually show everybody? And was it one of those publicly done? It was publicly done, but it was only to his disciples, and it was for a reason. He wasn't ready at that point continue to have a display of his power or who he was at that point. So yeah, that's a good point, Denise, that it does kind of set the example where he did make water to wine. So this individual knows of signs. So then he says, when this man heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went to ask him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. So this wasn't just somebody who was sick or so. It was a little bit of a distance. And here it says that, so in 47, who was this royal official? Do we know? I mean, I've read some different things that it says it could be tied to Herod's court, but they said that he traveled from at least 20 miles to head from where he was down over to where Jesus was. So, 20 miles back there is quite a distance, when you're on foot or whichever way you're going. So it was one of those situations that he was going out of his way to find Jesus, to at least find out what he could do for him. It shows also he was desperate, at that point, because his son was near death. I mean, if we had a child or a sibling or something else that was near death, we would be pretty desperate too, and we would be looking out for different things. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just reminding myself of the geography of it. It talks about how a prophet is not welcome in his own town. Nazareth is right to the west of Cana, maybe like a 15-minute drive, and then Capernaum is just right to the east of Cana. So Capernaum's to the east, and Cana's right in the middle of Nazareth.
Right.
And there, so it's at least a couple of days walk, I think, or a day walk.
So just keep that in mind, that the desperation that this individual has. Think of it as ourselves too. At times we have desperation as well, because what we want to do is be able to try to apply it somehow, to be able to see how it really applies, not only just back then, but we can see the application as well. So in verse 48, so Jesus said to him, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." You think that he was more or less being like, "Well, yeah, I'll help you out." What's his tone, do you think, there? A little frustrated. It seems like he's almost rebuking them, because that's all they want is signs. They want to see signs. Unless you see a sign or a wonder, you will not believe. So that might even fall back into the point, Denise, where you were talking about. He might have been to see the sign and wonder, and that's what the only reason why he may be saying the belief. Remember back before in the beginning of the end of chapter 3 or 4, where they said that people believe, but they really don't want to follow. Denise.
The you in this verse is plural, so he's speaking to the group. He's not just calling out individually.
Mm-hmm.
He's speaking to the group. And when Jesus cleared out the temple earlier in John, first thing the Jews said was, "What sign are you going to show us for this?"
Yeah.
So
it's back to
that's where it's coming from.
He knows the heart of it. So let's see how he actually the man reacts to this. And it says, the official said to him, "Sir, come down before my child dies." What does that say? I mean, that almost sounds even more desperate. So at that point he says, after Jesus said that, well, why would he just come back with that? What would we do? You said that. We had all we want to do is see signs. We won't believe unless we see a sign.
Well, the miracles he performed a miracle were personal. I mean, he was there with, he's able to perform miracles at a distance without him being actually present.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we can assume that the miracles they saw in Jerusalem were all where he was immediately present.
Right. Right.
So maybe he says, "You've got to be there to help him," and Jesus probably shows him that.
He didn't have to go anywhere. And we're going to get into that a little bit, where it's almost like something different than what they were normally used to. Miss Ann.
The man probably felt like maybe Jesus had to go there and touch his child or do something physical to the child in order to heal him. And, well, being today, you know, you think doctors, they have to, you know, see you and check your heart, you know, hear your heart and
So they do.
look inside you to see what's wrong with you. So back then, the doctors had to probably touch their patients. So,
I think, one thing too, it reminds me of, I'm not sure the chronology of this, but where Jesus is talking about the unrepentant cities, he does call out Capernaum, and you, Capernaum, will be exalted to heaven, you will be brought down to Hades. For if the mighty works done in you had been done in Sodom, it would have been remained until this day. But I tell you that it will be more tolerable on the day of judgment for you, for the land of Sodom, than for you. So this guy's from Capernaum, asking for a sign, maybe they just weren't believing regardless of what he did.
Mhm. You know, in verse, when it goes into verse 50, where Jesus said to him, "Go, your son will be alive, will live." And the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, and he went on his way. So right here, I mean, you can see the difference between the belief where he didn't see the signs, you know, where it was a different thing than what Jesus said about all the folks around there. They needed to see a sign. This guy didn't. He just believed. He, you know, in a lot of cases, be like, "Are you sure? You know, come on, come with me, you know, and help me out, please." But he believed that Jesus was going to be able to do that, what his spoken word said.
I think just before that, when he said, "Unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe," that was kind of his first answer. So perhaps that man thought he wasn't going to come by that answer. And to your point, this shows his desperation.
Right.
You know, come down
Right.
now before my child dies.
You know, sometimes too, you know, the desperation part of it, and we'll talk a little bit now about it instead of at the end. Think of ourselves, you know, when we really want to believe that Jesus is the Christ, or anybody that you're talking to. What is it the most that makes someone want Jesus and need Jesus or search for Jesus? Almost desperation in some cases. You know, and Jesus is understands that, yes, but he doesn't want that all the time, I'm sure. You know, just like us as fathers and mothers, you know, do we want our kid to love us out of desperation all the time? No, not at all.
Yeah, I wish we could hear Jesus' tone of voice when he said this, because the point of Jesus doing all these signs is for people to believe.
Right.
That's to demonstrate who he is. And John says that's like why I'm writing this book. I mean, skip ahead to chapter 20.
Uh-huh.
It says that he did many other signs, which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may believe. Right? They're written down so that we know that Jesus did these things, so that we believe he's the Son of God.
Right.
So, like, what did he mean? You know, what did he mean by it? It's just tricky to think through.
I think my first thought to that is, you know, there's a lot of people that go to church for reasons other than seeking God. And perhaps Jesus knew a lot of people's heart and that they wanted some sign or miracle, but it wasn't so that they could have this relationship with God or seek after God. It was just like, what can I get out of this?
Right. And you know, and
I
that's
see that now.
and you know what's interesting is that's what that guy was going down there to see him for. What can I get out of this? He was talking about more or less the physical right now, my son, and we're going to see that in the next sign. The individual, you know, was being healed by Jesus. It was a sign, but it was a physical thing of the earth. But then he turns it into a spiritual matter later. He never really turned it into a spiritual matter in this situation, except for the fact that he believed, right? And he believed that he could do that at afar. Right.
On the other hand, nobody actually saw the sign. It was just words so far.
So far, yeah.
Yeah, he didn't see anything until he was mostly home.
Right.
So actually, nobody really saw it.
Right. So let's talk about verse 51. So as he was going down, his servants met him and told him that his son was recovering. Now his servants didn't know what the deal was. They just wanted to rush back to tell the official that, hey, your son is getting better. I don't know why, but he's getting better. And that's when he said, wait a second here. He said, so he asked him the hour when he began to get better, and they said to him yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him. Boom. So his father knew that that was the hour when Jesus said to him, your son will live. So he linked it back together again. And so he could actually understand that it was Jesus who did that. Yeah.
Come to think, first of all, the whole household, I mean, his family, were aware of his son's sickness and severity of it. So when he became sick, he probably learned from the nobleman that it was Jesus that healed him, even at a distance. So they all believed. But notice what it says here, that he in verse 50, so the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, and he went on his way. It's similar to what happened to Abraham. Abraham in Genesis 15:6, God promised him all these things, and before he received the promises, it says, and he believed in the Lord, and he accounted to him for righteousness. So it's a similar situation that he was promised something that he didn't witness,
Right.
but he had faith, like
Right,
Abraham.
right. Okay, let's tie that together before we move on to the next one. Why is that important to us? Yeah, I mean, are we going to see these signs? Are we going to see these miracles? I mean, we see them in the written word, but what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to be like this official.
We keep on referencing the end of this book about these are written to believe, but Jesus will point, blessed are those who haven't seen yet believe. That's this guy.
Yeah, and it has to be us as well.
I think we see a good example of that in John chapter 20, verses 27, when he talks to Thomas. And he told him, he said, blessed are those who believe without seeing.
Mm-hmm.
See, it's verse 29. Jesus said to him, have you believed because you've seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen, yet they believe. So I mean, it kind of ties it back together to that.
Right.
He's trying to say, you don't have to see me to believe me.
Right.
You just got to
And it's
trust
all
in
about
me.
belief. It isn't about trying to get, something to happen for Jesus to do something for
Right.
us. It's about a belief area here. Now, in this next one, we're going to see the belief that's more explained from the physical to the spiritual as well. Miss Ann.
It goes to trust. All Jesus said was, your son is healed. And just a spoken word that this official had to believe in this man saying these words.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody tells you something, and that's a little more fast, or you have to have belief in that person, or trust in that person, that what they say, they mean, and it's gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
But they also, it's kind of a thing where Jesus performed a miracle, and he said some things about his flesh and his blood, about eating it, and people left him. And he asked his disciples, are you going to go, you can leave too? And Peter comes back and says, where are we going to go?
Mm.
I mean, he says, you have the words of life. And that's today, why give up on the Lord? He's the only one that has the words of life. He's the only one that's died for us. So we can be disappointed, perhaps our hopes be, not fulfilled like we thought they would, but still, we have to stick with the Lord because he's the one with words of life, and we can't go anywhere else.
So let's talk a little bit about the next scene. So we had the official, the belief at afar, and he was able to believe without specifically seeing. In this one here, healing at the pool, 1 through 15. Can I get a reader for that to go through that one for me? Yeah.
After there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there in Jerusalem by the sheep gate, a pool, in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. And these these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "You want to be healed?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and when I am going, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Get up, take up your bed and walk."
Okay, let's stop right there. Thank you, Mike. So we have the scene here where Jesus is going down to Jerusalem for a feast, and it's really unspecified. I don't think it's that important, else John would have told us specifically what feast it was. There are different ones that they go down towards, but John talks about the miracle that happened, and in this situation, he was going up to Jerusalem. And he says, and now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed columns, and in this laid a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. So what is that? What's the scene that we see here?
Got a pool with
Yeah.
a bunch of invalids laying around,
Right?
and they're under the shelter of the portico.
So so if you think about this, it's an interesting situation in that, for one, they're either cast there or they go there to go to the pool. And what was that pool for? Healing, right? Or at least that's what the tradition was, that they felt that pool was for a healing situation. So why would Jesus, for first of all, go up to that, up to that area?
Desperate people.
Desperate people, right? So what does that tell us about where he would even be? Even with us, as we are all desperate people, right? And so he's going there to specifically create a sign again. He's going to do a miracle, but it's a real sign that he's looking for, and he's going to a place that, as John said, desperate people, right? So he's not just going right into the temples or over to see the Jews or anything else. He's going to a place where he can see desperate people. Why was he actually sent down to earth? For who? For the desperate people. Okay, so he goes over there, and there's invalids. I'm not sure what invalids are. I guess a multitude of invalids, which means that they're all invalid in some way. They have a problem.
They're invalids.
Yeah, they're invalids. Right. Yeah. So that there was a man specifically that he focused on, and this man had been there invalid for 38 years, which means he's an invalid for 38 years. Now, what is the reasoning that I've read different areas on that. There's specific reasons, as Jed talked about. John didn't put things in there, information in there. Jesus didn't have specific information, not unless there's a reason. So he's paralyzed for 38 years. That is symbolic of something, isn't it?
Yep.
What is it?
Deuteronomy chapter 2.
Exactly, Deuteronomy chapter 2. And what is that?
In the last 38 years, when the last person died in the wilderness, the last man.
Okay, so that was basically when the punishment was over. So in this case, this man was down for 38 years, punished. I don't know. He was down. He was desperate. He had nothing. He didn't have anything there. Go ahead, Miss Ann.
Also, 38 years, and all the years he'd been trying to get in this pool, each time he went, and all the neighbors and everyone knows that this man cannot walk. He is paralyzed. So when this miracle happens,
Well,
it's going to be, amazing to
Right.
a whole bunch of people.
Right, and it kind of shows you too that your neighbor's not going to help you. He can't help you. He's desperate, right? We are desperate. My neighbor's not going to be able to help me as Jesus can.
Well, I think it says two things. First of all, it shows the callousness of the other people. for one thing, for 38 years. Come on, let's get this guy in the water, you know, every day we walk by this guy and he still stands in the same place all the time. The second one, I think the Lord kind of hit me and says, you want to be healed? Well, if he is healed and he can walk and be a normal person, he's going to have to go to work. And so far, he didn't have to go to work. He's been, for 38 years, he's kind of been retired. He's mooching off of people's donations and alms. And so he said, "You want to be healed? Yes or no?" Well, I can't get in. You know, nobody's helping me. And you know, that poor pitiful me. He's having a pity party.
Right.
Sorry, you want to be healed or don't you?
Right.
It's yes or no.
And the thing of it is that, you know, he's still looking at trying to get into this moving water as they stir it up. I guess that's, again, the moving water part where their tradition says that will help you heal. Did it really heal him? Probably not. You know, I mean, it's not what, he had Jesus right in front of him, and he had the water down here, and he was still looking at the water, right? We can be in that situation too, where we can be looking at the wrong thing and have him right in front of us there. So he asked him, just like he said, Jesus asked him, "Do you want to be healed?" And what does the man say?
I can't get in the water.
Can't get in the water. And then Jesus said what?
Take up your bed and walk.
Rise, take up your bed and walk. He didn't sit there and say, okay, well, let me help you get into this stirring water and we'll see what happens, right? Why didn't he do that? Because he doesn't need that. When we go to Jesus, we don't need to have that traditions that we have. We just have to be able to understand what he says and what the belief really means as we're going through here. And in this situation, did he even believe? He didn't even know it was Jesus, right? So at that point, what does that tell us? Does that mean we don't need to believe?
Well, there are people today who says they can't be healed unless they believe.
Yeah?
Yeah, and then you have
Yeah.
the man at the beautiful gate that Peter and John healed, and he obviously didn't say he was looking for something money, and he said, I don't have any, but I'll give you what I got, you know, and so he didn't have faith, this man didn't have faith, but they were still healed. So faith on the person part being, person being healed was necessary for them to do the miracle.
Okay, so in this situation, you know, he was down, he was invalid for 38 years. Again, the miracle happened immediately, of course, right? He had no muscles in his legs or anything else, but he still had, at that point, he was able to get up and walk, and not only that, throw the mattress on his back and take off. You know, I mean, it isn't like we see sometimes where, you know, we always see miracles where individuals, you know, that they're not healed, will just, you know, relax, and you can't really prove it. These guys, they've seen him there for 38 years. He gets up and he walks, so we can see that it was an immediate heal. It was a command. Jesus commanded it, and it happened. But we're going to see a conflict in a little bit. Denise?
I think ultimately it shows that he had faith in the wrong thing. He was
Oh, yeah.
focused on the tools. Of course, he didn't know who Jesus was, didn't know that was an option, but
Mhm.
when we do that, we put our faith in, or we look in the wrong direction.
Sure.
We're not looking at Jesus like we should.
Right. So he says, get up and take it and walk, take up your bed and walk. And the man, once the man was healed, he took up his bed and he walked. And he says, we go into the next section. We'll walk into that one now. Now that day was the Sabbath. What do we know about the Sabbath? No work on the Sabbath, right? So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, it is the Sabbath, and it is unlawful for you to take up your bed. I mean, this guy's been down for 38 years, right? And he comes walking in with a bed on him. Well, the first thing these guys say is, what are you doing? Doing work. They missed the whole point.
Well, it wasn't work, they were just making excuses.
Exactly.
It wasn't work
I know it. But what were they focused on?
on the Sabbath.
Yeah, they were focused on the Sabbath instead of the miracle or the sign that actually happened, which is unusual. I guess at that point, you know, what was their minds thinking? I don't know. Not unless they already had an idea of something that was going on. I don't know that. So anyway, he, let's see here, he says, But he answered them, the man who healed me, that man said to me, take up your bed and walk, which was, of course, we know this is Jesus. They asked him, who is the man who said that? Take up your bed and walk. Now, the man who had been healed didn't know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn as there was a crowd in the place. I can imagine what the crowd would have been like if they all saw, one guy get healed by him. They would all be over there trying to get healed as well. But Jesus didn't come to do that. He just came to make that sign, to show them, to use that area. It isn't about this world. He's looking about the next world. And then after Jesus found him in the temple, he said, see, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse happens to you. Wow, what is that all about? That's an interesting statement that Jesus comes in. He doesn't come in and say, wow, look at you now. You're all healed up. You're strong. You can go out and have a great life.
The implication is that his 38 years of sickness was a result of his sin. Don't sin anymore unless you worse before you.
Anything else?
Well, in Luke 13, Jesus says, you're not more sinners just because you have a tower fall on. You have to repent, unless you also turn. So sin doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be, have a tower fall on you, or you're going to be lame for the next 38 years. But it does imply, I think, it says that his sin may have been the cause of the injury.
I think it goes a little deeper than that. Go ahead, Glenn.
Look at verse 13. It says, now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, or he was. He didn't know Jesus. He didn't recognize Jesus. All he knew is he was healed. He got up, took his bed, walked away. But that's when Jesus went to the temple, brought his sins to his attention. He said, see, you are well, sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you. He was giving him a warning, telling him, you've been healed, you start over, sin no more.
Kind of had spiritual implication here when he said, sin no more, lest the worst thing come upon you. Talking about eternity.
Right. What can be worse than being crippled for 38 years?
Being separated from Christ.
Exactly. That is the absolute, the tragedy of the entire thing. At least, it seems like that when I think about the amount of anguish this gentleman had for 38 years trying to just get into the water, right?
You don't know how long he's been trying to get in the water.
Okay.
All we know is he's been sick 38 years.
Okay.
He had been trying.
Right. The key is he's been down for 30. He's been an invalid for 38 years.
And he'd been hanging out at that place for that while.
Well, we don't know exactly how long, but that's not
mention
the point of the whole
Right.
thing here.
The point is, Jesus healed him, brought his sin to his attention, and told him to turn from it and sin no more.
Right, and so that nothing worse may happen to you. So the man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who healed him. So at least at that point he understood that it was Jesus. And this is why the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, my Father is working until now, and I am working. So what are we talking about in this situation here?
Everything Jesus did, he did at the behest of his Father. And he couldn't do anything unless the Father approved it. So he was saying that basically if it's okay with God, it's okay with you, should be okay with it. There's nothing else God can do. I mean, Jesus would forgive people's sins, and he even told the thief on the cross, you're going to go to paradise when you die. And so he could do anything he wanted to. And he said, because God his Father made himself equal with God, and they didn't like that idea either.
Well, yeah, we're going to get into that. This is the last area here, and that was the last section there where Jesus and the Sabbath, the conflict that they have. We just saw that, but there's going to be another area here in verse 18 when Jesus is basically stating that he is equal with God because he is God.
Well, the Sabbath was given for a day of rest, but Jesus said, no, there's work to do, we're working. God is working and I am working.
Well, and he's getting ox out of the ditch.
Yeah, I mean, the whole situation.
Good
talks-
example.
Right, but what were the Jews worried about? At least the legalists.
Violation of their tradition.
Yes,
Their-
tradition.
Their man-made laws.
Mhm.
They had God's laws.
Right, and that's what they were specifically focused on, and they got worked up when he came back and said, Jesus did this. Well, then at that point, Jesus, in verse 18, it says, this was why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, as you said, it was just a tradition, but he was also calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God.
Sounds like Jesus is giving all kinds of excuses for him to kill him.
Well, I mean, he's starting out. This is another turning point that we're seeing, where the situation was where these Jews were looking for him. They were trying to figure out what he's doing. They were looking for a reason, and as soon as he says it's equal for him, that's it. We're full on now.
Well, even said in his trial, say he's blasphemed. What more do we need of witnesses?
Yeah.
So they, don't need to come in front of that.
Right. And as we go on to the next sections in here, we stop seeing as many miracles and signs, but we start seeing a little bit more in regard to his working through and letting them understand the significance of him being there. So let's think a little bit about what are some of the key takeaways when we talk about the first one, where faith without sight. Is there a key takeaway that we can have? We did discuss that a little bit. Let's just kind of review on that.
A lot of these interactions so far is talking about Jesus giving life. With Nicodemus, it was being born again. With the woman, living water. And then the son brought back to life, or almost from the point of death. And now this man is given a new life.
Right. Right. And I think that's exactly right. He's giving life, right? Now, does that mean that the reason we want to go to Jesus is so we can be given life? Not this life. And that's what he was talking about when he started talking about sin no more, and so nothing worse can happen to you. So you don't lose that everlasting life. And they didn't understand that at this point. But we're going to see a little bit more of that where it starts unfolding more, even back when you were saying with the water, the living water, and things of that nature. So grace before understanding, the healing pool. In that situation, he didn't understand, right? But he still can heal the helpless. He still knows exactly what they want. How does that apply to us, though? Does that mean he's going to go through and heal, all kinds of different remedies or ailments that we may have? We don't know that. But it wasn't really about that. I think it was about him showing his ability, his strength, what he can do, as well as being able to look towards the future afterlife in a spiritual way. All right, well, we're out of time. We couldn't really talk a little bit more about the Sabbath area, but I think that we got the point. I appreciate all the comments. Go ahead.
A little bit of trivia here. John has water in at least 4 of his 7
Yeah.
miracles that John emphasized, water.
And light. He talks about, but he is talking about light.